sitting there so that I wouldn't forget. What did I do? I forgot. Okay, I'm pathetic.
I thought you hit it when you started fiddling with stuff over there.
So did I. All right, so anyways, folks, here we are. The selling price is the rate times the cost plus the cost. Now, I want to do a little bit of a math trick here, folks. It's called factoring, or you can think of it as undistributing, okay? So in this side of the equal sign where you have rate times cost plus cost, I want to factor out the cost. I want to pull the cost and only write cost down once. So if I take the cost out and put it outside of parentheses, what does it turn into inside the parentheses? So what does it become? So think about it. If you have to distribute that C, you're going to stay inside of here and say, oh, I've got rate, right? Because cost times rate gives you cost times rate. And then inside of these parentheses, I have plus 1. Because if you distribute this C, what does it become?
C.
C times the rate plus C times 1, which is C. The same thing that's up above, okay? And this is a nice formula that you can use to calculate the selling price when you're given the cost and the markup as a percentage. If you just add 1 to the rate and multiply by the cost, boom, get straight to the selling price. Now, the reason why that's nice, folks, is that this also gives us a way to calculate the cost when we have the selling price and the markup. So, what we can do is divide both sides by 1 plus the rate, or rate plus 1. Again, remember, it doesn't matter what order you put that in. And since the rate plus 1 is being multiplied, these actually cancel, right? And what we get then is a formula that we can use to calculate what cost is, which can be handy if we are trying to find it out later on. So we can say, hey, I'm going to rewrite it as cost equals the selling price over, and if you don't mind, I'm going to write it 1 plus the rate instead of rate plus 1. And what you'll discover is that we're going to run into some problems where this formula is going to make our lives easier, okay? And the key is learning when do we get to use that, all right? So, anyways, what this does now is it's given us a bunch of different tools that we can use to solve problems. So here are our tools on this side of the universe, right? Our first tool is the really basic equation where the selling price is just the cost plus the markup. That is a basic tool for this entire chapter, folks, okay? So don't lose sight of that one. The second tool is how we calculate the markup. It's the cost times the rate. That's just the definition of markup on cost. And then those two equations that we just created a second ago. That the selling price is cost times 1 plus the rate. And I'm going to write it 1 plus the rate instead of rate plus 1 if you don't mind. My brain works that way and that's the way I will write it. And then the fourth equation that we just used, we just saw a second ago. All right, so these are our 4 tools in our tool shed, all right? And the idea behind this, folks, is that there are 4 things that you may be asked to find, right? Because there's the selling price, the cost, the markup, and the rate. 4 different things. I am going to be giving you 2 of those things, and your job, find the other 2, or potentially one other one that I care about, okay? So that's the idea, all right? And you need to be able to manipulate the tools in order to find what I asked for, okay? So let's try a couple of problems on this side of the universe, okay? Alright, so first problem. Let's suppose again, remember, I'm a store owner, right? So I buy a toaster for $5. I mark up 220% by cost. How much do I sell the toaster for? How much do I sell toaster for? All right. So, what did I give you in this problem, folks? What did I give you? Remember, I am the one who's going to sell stuff, and I have to buy stuff in order to sell it.
Rate and cost.
Rate and cost. Remember, folks, the percent is always the rate. Take your free points whenever you can. The rate is 220%. How am I going to write 220%? 2.2, right? Remember that rates are always decimals when we work with them. That's why I write the word rate instead of percent, because I want you to think of it as being a percentage, but really not calculating with percent. You're really calculating with decimal. And the other thing that you got up in this problem is the fact that I bought the toaster for $5. That's the cost. And again, this is where you have to stop yourself a little bit and think, right? A lot of people say, well, you bought the toaster for $5. That means the price of the toaster is $5. So isn't the selling price $5? No. Again, the idea is that I am the business owner. I went out and found a toaster for $5 and purchased it so that I can then resell it. So that's really my cost. All right? Now, what did I ask for? How much do I sell it for? Which one of these tools can I use to find the selling price? Can I use this first tool? Do I know what the markup amount is?
Yeah.
Do I know it right now? No. I could find it, right? I could spend a couple of minutes finding the markup and then use that formula, but technically right now, no, I can't. I would have to do Formula 2 and then use Formula 1, and that would be okay, or I could just jump to Formula 3, right? Because Tool 3 says, hey, to find the selling price, all I need is the cost and the rate. Those are two things I already have. Jump to it right now. So you can say, oh, great. I know how to do this problem in one step. Cost times 1 plus the rate. And then it's just a matter of saying, oh, well, that's 5 times 1 plus 2.2. And again, folks, you can add 1 in your head. Please don't put that 1 plus 2.2 in your calculator. Except for you, Greg, sorry. Just kidding, of course, Greg.
Yes, I know. I just turned my bell tone down.
And so what is 5 times 3.2? I will sell this toaster for $16, okay? That's the idea behind marking up by cost. Hmm? Don't hurt yourself. All right? All right, so that was a relatively straightforward problem, right, folks? Because a lot of you noticed that I could have also done this problem by instead using equations 1 and 2 first, right? Instead of using equation 3, I could have said, hey, find out what the markup is, find out that it's an $11 markup, take that markup, add it to the $5 cost, and the price of the toaster was 16 bucks. That would have been a perfectly acceptable way of doing this problem as well. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? But what I want you to try and do is to get in the habit of using the easiest formulas possible. 1 is always better than 2, at least in this case, right? So, not too bad though, right? Huh? All right, so let's try another one that's a little bit more complicated now. Or at least it will seem that way. All right. Okay, so this time, let's suppose that I am selling so if I'm selling toasters, what else should I sell?
Bread.
I'm not gonna resell bread, that sounds scary to me, okay? I'm selling a pan, whatever. Let's suppose I'm selling a pan for $12. So it's a generic fry pan, right? Let's suppose that I mark up 150% on cost. And note, folks, that it can be written either way, on or by cost, just so that you know, all right? And my question to you is, what did I pay for the pan? So this one, there is no way for you to sort of use the first 2 tools in our toolbox in order to find the answer to this particular problem. Because what did I give you in this problem, folks?
Selling price, rate.
Selling price and rate, right? I told you that I'm selling the pan for $12 and that the rate is 150% or 1.5. So I can't use equation 1 or equation 2 because in order to calculate what the markup is, I need to know what the cost of my item is, and I don't know that yet, right? So this is where you use that 4th tool in your toolbox, folks, right? Where the cost is equal to the selling price divided by 1 plus the rate. So you can say, this is 12 over 1 plus 1.5. And again, you can add that 1 in your heads. Please do it. And now you can see that the cost is just going to be 12 divided by 2.5. And so what does my cost wind up being? What was that? 4.20? Oh, $4.80, yes, there you go. So originally I paid $4.80 for it. I marked it 150% of that number, right? What's 150% of $4.80? No, that's what it's going to be. So the idea is that it was, if you take 150% of $4.80, you'll get $7.20, because 480 plus 720 gets you to the 12 bucks. All right? Not bad? Again, though, the key here, 4 tools in the toolbox. All right? All right, now, what happens when we mark up on price? What's the difference? Well, the only difference is that your markup is based on the selling price instead of the cost. Now, let's play a similar game that we did over on the other side. Right? So when we were marking up by cost, we got this new equation by substituting in what the markup was. We're going to play that same thing over here, right? So we're going to say, the selling price is, instead of the markup, now it's rate times selling price. plus the cost. All right? Now, I want to do the same thing I did in the markup by cost thing, where I factor out the letter that's the same. So we were over on the other side, we had the two C's together. What's wrong with this equation?
There's one C.
Yeah, the S's are not together right now, folks. They're separated by the equal sign. We can't combine things across an equal sign. So what can I do to get this rate times S over here with the S?
Right.
This is being added. What's the opposite of adding?
Oh,
Subtracting. Yeah, just minus it, right? So that's what we're going to do to get everything together first, right? So the idea is that we need all the S's together so that we can then play that same game, right? So when we do that, we're going to get S minus, oops, I'm blue, rate times S equals the cost. And now play that same game where you pull the S out of everything on the left-hand side, right? So what does this become? This becomes S times what's inside the parentheses, guys?
great.
1 minus R, or the rate, right? So notice it's minus this time instead of plus. Slight difference. And here, folks, is one of our tools right there. That when you're marking up by price, this is the formula used to calculate the cost, right? The cost is the selling price times 1 minus the rate. And we can do the same sort of a thing that we did over here, where we divide by the stuff in the parentheses to get the other equation by itself. We can do the same thing here and say, oh, hey, S is going to be the cost divided by 1 minus the rate. Just like we did over here. I'm not going to write the whole division out and cancel stuff, but it's the same concept, right? And this is our fourth tool in our toolbox to some degree, all right? So we can create our tools for this side of the universe. And the tools will look very similar, folks, but they are very different at the same time, right? Note, the first tool is always the same no matter what side of the planet you're on, okay? Whether you're on the markup on cost side or the markup on price side, selling price is cost plus markup. That's given, all right? There's our slight shift in the formula, right? Because we're going to multiply by the selling price instead of by the cost. And again, it doesn't matter the order that you write them in. And then that third equation we came up where the cost is the selling price times 1 minus the rate. And then our fourth one where we divide. And there are our 4 tools on the other side of the universe, okay? Note, they look very similar, but they all have a slight shift, right? So note the S and the C tend to flip sides, and instead of being plus, they tend to be minus, or they are minus, on the markup on price side, all right? So, let's do a couple of problems with that formula, all right? So, let's suppose we say, let's suppose that I buy a toaster for, let's keep it relatively the same, how about $5? And this time, let's say I mark up 80% on price, okay? And note the difference, right? This is what separates the two worlds, how you mark up. So one of the things that I want you guys to do when you're doing the Chapter 8 homework is read the problem and say, hey, which side am I on? Am I using cost or am I using markup on price? Okay? Because based on which one you use an entirely different set of tools from the toolbox. Okay? Alright, so. So what do I sell this toaster for when I mark up 80% on price? Alright? Now, again, I would like you guys to attack these problems the same way. Write down what I gave you first, and then based on what I gave you, go to your tools and say, great, what can I use? Alright? So, I buy a toaster for $5. What does that tell me? What does that represent? You got one of four numbers, values to choose from. What is the $5 up there, folks? It's your cost. Again, be careful. It's real easy to say that selling price was $5 because someone was selling you the toaster for $5, right? Again, remember, you're a business, okay? The rate is 80%, and again, call it 0.8. Now, what am I looking for? Selling price. What tool do I use to find the selling price when I'm marking up by price? Cost over 1 minus the rate. Excellent, right? So that's your job. Find the equation. Where you have the two pieces of information on the right-hand side and the left-hand side is the piece that you're looking for, right? So this, 5 divided by 1 minus 0.8. Please be careful with 1 minus 0.8. Five divided by 0.2, and what is 5 divided by 0.2, folks? $25. Compare these two problems that are right next to each other, folks. So when you were marking up on cost, folks, what was my markup amount, percent? 220%. If someone told you that they marked up something 220%, what would you say about buying that item? Come on, 220%.
It's over 2 times the price.
Yeah, it's over 2 times whatever you paid for it, right? Right? And it is, right, if you think about it, because it wound up being 16 from 5. But notice this other problem. Notice that the price that I paid for it, the cost of me, $5 was the same. Notice the markup rate. What's the markup rate, folks? It's only 80%. What did the price wind up being, though? That's because you were using the other type of markup. The markup was based on the price, not on what you bought it for, okay? And this is one of the new tricks that businesses are trying to use right now when they start talking about the cost and price of a particular item. They'll say that, oh, well, my markup on this particular item over here on the right is only 80%. But it's 80% on the price, not 80% on their original cost, right? So the cool thing about it, folks, is that the difference between the cost and the selling price is $20. That's what 80% of 25 is, right? I mean, this is a new ploy that businesses are trying to work with because you guys are starting to become educated. When you hear that an item is marked up 500%, you immediately go, I'm not buying it, right? I'm just not going to. But if they say, oh, well, it's only marked up 80% on price. All we hear is 80%, right? The on price part of it, we tend not to hear, and so we say, well, it's only an 80% markup, that means I'm getting a fairly decent deal. Great, I'll buy it. And note that in this particular example, you'd have been better off using the 220% markup on cost than the 80% markup on price. Okay? So please keep in mind that these problems definitely change when you change what you mark up on, whether it's the price or the cost, okay? So, again, just be careful. All right, so let's do another problem over here. Let's suppose this time I am selling a pan for whatever. Let's suppose I'm selling it for $20. I mark up 40% on price. And I ask what was my cost. So, what did I give you in this problem this time? Selling it for $20, my rate's 40%. And then all we need to do is to find the cost, because that's what I asked for. And again, you go back to your toolbox, and it says, oh, there's that formula for cost. Cost equals S times 1 minus the rate. $20 times 1 minus 0.4. Again, please be careful with 1 minus 0.4. 0.6, and then 0.6 times 20. I originally paid $12 for a pan. All right. So the key, folks, is that none of this is tricky. The formulas aren't overly complicated, but you do have to realize which side of the world you're on, right? And I'm guessing that when it comes time for it, you will have on your note card, where did my formulas go? Oh, right there. These pieces of information, right? So honestly, folks, the note card should contain these 4 tools for the one world, right? This is on cost, and then in the other world where it's on price. And as long as you only use the tools when you're in that side of the universe, you're all good. All right? All right, so you want a slightly complicated one then before we move on? Okay, I think you guys can handle it. Okay, so let's try it. Let's suppose I mark up, let's say, let's make it not overly scary, but let's go with 60% on cost. I marked up a shirt by $10. What was the cost and selling price of the shirt? So note, there were 4 pieces of information in all of those problems, right? Cost, selling price, markup, and markup rate. All right? So I can give you any 2 of them and ask for the other 2. So here's one of those instances where I did. I gave you 2. I want you to find the other 2. All right? All right, so the first thing that you guys got to tell me is, what did I give you? Okay, always take the freebies, right? There you go. Take it and run. Now, what else did I give you? How much I marked up. So what should I call that? Yeah, or M in this case, right? No death allowed. All right, so what do? I want the cost and the selling price. Note, which side of the universe am I on?
The cost.
The cost side of the universe. Please make sure you use the formulas that are with cost, not with price. Okay? So, here are my four tools, right? Which of those tools can I use? Where I have the M and the rate.
Number two,
Number two. Why number two? Why can't I use any of the other ones?
if you know the markup is $10,
Uh-huh.
but you don't know the cost, so to get the cost, then you can figure out the selling price.
Alright, excellent. Note, folks, the only tool you can use in that particular instance here is number two. Because in every one of the other equations, you need to have two letters that you don't have yet, right? You don't have selling price or cost, so you can't use 3 or 4 or 1. You got to use 2 first. So we're going to use the fact that the markup equals the cost times the rate. So 10 equals C times 0.6. What do I do to get C by itself, folks? Divide by the 0.6. Again, keep your algebra skills honed. What is my cost?
16.67.
Okay, good. And since it's money, you know to round to the nearest penny, $16.67. Now that I have the cost, what else do I want? Selling price. How are you going to find it?
Formula 3.
How do you want me to do it?
Formula number 3.
We could use formula number 3. What else could I use?
Number 3.
Cost plus markup.
Yeah, don't forget the really basic one, right? It's okay to use 3 in that instance, folks. You would get the same answer, but that's obviously more work. This one is relatively straightforward, right? If I know the cost is $16.67 and I marked it up by $10, just add them, right? I'm going to sell that shirt for $26.67. So again, this is the idea behind these sorts of problems, folks. I'm going to give you 2 pieces of information. You have to look at what you're given and say, hey, which of these is going to work and which of these is going to work best, all right? Now, the cool thing about it is that if you take a couple of more steps than other people, that's fine. As long as you get to the right answer, I'm a happy man. But what I really hope you guys do is find the shortest possible way to get to the answer, all right? All right, so not too bad? Alright, so let's see. So what happens when we get these markups and markdowns together? Okay, so you guys are probably pretty good at markdowns by now because that was all chapter 7, right? Discounting things, right? So let's suppose that I have a painting, right? I have a painting by Marshall Van Gogh. He's a very famous painter.
Should I Google it?
Let's suppose we have the selling price set at $600 right now. So it's this wonderful, nice portrait of, you know, whatever, some old woman sitting in a room with her feet in the, you know, in a tub of water, right? I think that's a Van Gogh painting. I don't remember. Whatever. Anyways, Marshall painted it though, not this Vincent Gogh guy, right? So, unfortunately, as I'm trying to sell this painting, it sits in my store for a month, right? Painting does not sell for 1 month. What do I do? Yeah, mark down, let's say 30% by price. Okay, so I'm going to cut 30% off of the price, all right? Painting still doesn't sell for another month. What do I do? Yeah, mark it down some more. Poor Van Gogh. Mark down. This time we mark it down 20% by price. And note, folks, this is 20% on the new price, not the old price. I.e., these are chained markdowns. Now, the cool thing about it, though, is that after that second month, Van Gogh, who is now a starving artist and can't afford rent and can't buy food. Exactly. How'd you know? Next month, Van Gogh cuts off ear to give gift to girlfriend.
Apparently that's middle. Apparently he cut off his ear, just gave it to a chick to give to another guy because they were in a really heated argument or something.
Is that the new supposed thing?
I guess.
Who knows, right? When I was in school, Van Gogh cut off his ear because he was in love and he wanted to, and she rejected him because his paintings weren't selling, and so he cut off his ear to tell her that he was serious about art.
I mean, that's a better story. Could you imagine being so mad at a guy you cut yourself for it? You guys are cutting off limbs.
Yeah, we don't. But anyways,
God,
when
you're
you
such a douchebag. Here's my arm.
when you cut off your ear, folks, what happens to the value of your paintings?
Goes up. Your nuts.
Okay, you bet it does, right? So in this case, now we mark up the painting. Let's say we mark it up 80% on price. So what am I going to ask? What's the current price? So, what do we need to do, folks?
Shrink first markdowns like a chain discount.
Yeah, we have to do these one at a time, right? We got to mark it down 30%, then we got to mark it down 20%. And then after we've done that, we need to mark it back up 80%, okay? So, we'll do it the long way first. And then I will show you that there is a shorter way to do it, all right? So, the price started at $600. What did we do first?
Mark down by 30%.
Mark down by 30%. How do we take 30% off this price?
Times 0.7.
Shh, you don't know that.
Sorry.
We multiply by 0.3 and we say, hey, we're going to take off $180 and get down to $420, right? And then what are we going to do with that price? Mark it down to 20%. Again, note we're marking off 20% of this price, not the original price. $84. We're down to $336. Now we need to mark it up 80%. How do we do that? That actually won't work. So instead of subtracting when we multiply, we're going to add this time, right? That's the difference between marking up versus marking down. All right? So what's 0.8 times that? What was that?
268.8.
268.8. So we're going to mark it up $268.80. So add that back. Note, here's the difference between marking down versus marking up, right? Is that you add. And where we wind up at, 8, 4, carrier 1, 0, carrier 1. Final price of my painting, $604.80. Now, shortcut. You guys were hinting at it a little bit, right?
I'm sorry, I just like the easy.
When you take 30% off of something, what percent of the painting are you actually paying for? 70%, right? 1 minus 0.3 equals 0.7. You guys were doing this non-stop forever in the last chapter, right? Notice it gets us to the $420 in one step, right? So when I take that 20% off, what am I going to do instead of taking 20% off? Multiply by 0.8, and nicely enough, when I multiply by 0.8, what do I get from that multiplication? 336. Now that piece, folks, I believe you already could do from chapter 7. You knew how to do a discount, all right? Now here's the slightly different approach. When you mark up something by 80%, when you mark down, you do 1 minus the rate because you're discounting, you're subtracting. Well, when you mark up, what are you doing? You're adding. So instead of doing 1 minus, guess what we do? 1 plus. And guess what 336 is times 1.8? Gets us right to our answer in one fell swoop. All right? So when you are dealing with markups and markdowns together, okay? The key is realizing that any of the markdowns, you just multiply by 1 minus the rate, just like you've been doing discounts in chapter 7 forever. All right? The only difference is that when you mark up the cost, just add that rate to it, to 1, and multiply. And it's the exact same thing. That's what's cool about it. And the other cool thing about it, folks, is that does it make a difference what order I did this in? Doesn't, right? I could have marked up 80% and then down 30 and down 20. Our normal instinct is to say, well, no, the numbers are going to be all different. But remember, all we're really doing is multiplying by these 3 numbers, 0.7, 0.8, and 1.8. If we change the order, does it change it? Nope, multiplication is commutative. It doesn't matter what order you do it in. Doesn't matter what order you do your discounts and your markups, okay? So markups and markdowns, use the shortcut, okay? So, let's do another one. Now that you know the trick, let's do it fast, all right? So, I have, let's see, I have a bed I am selling for $500. If I mark down 10% on price, then mark up 20% on price, and then mark down 10% on price, what's the price? And a lot of people will look at this problem and say, well, if you marked it down 2 10% and marked it up 1 20%, what should the price be? It should be the same, right? I mean, the percentages are all exactly the same. But does it work that way, folks? No, do not be tricked into working that way, okay? So, here's the shortcut for doing this problem, right? What do I do when I mark down 10%? Multiply by 0.9, because it's a mark down, right? When you mark up, now you add. 1 plus the 0.2 is 1.2. And then last but not least, when you mark down by the next 10%. And the cool part about it is, folks, you can do them all in one fell swoop. Okay? You can just multiply across and bam. Done. Don't have to worry about the intermediate values at all if you don't want to. Alright? So what's my final price of this bed that I'm trying to sell? $486?
Yeah.
So if you have multiple markups and markdowns, again, 1 minus for the markdown, 1 plus for the markup. Done. Alright? Alright, not bad? Okay, let's see. Alright, so one of the other things that you have to do when it comes to marking down things and marking up things is trying to figure out what price to set on goods that are quote-unquote perishable. First off, what is a perishable good, folks? Yeah, good word. It's stuff that can perish, right? Well, what sorts of stuff perishes at a store? Bananas, lettuce, produce, right? That's the number one thing. If you're running a grocery store, you definitely have stuff that perishes, right? So how do you set the price of a head of lettuce? If every head of lettuce costs you a dime, you want to make a certain amount of money from the selling of these lettuce, but you know that at the end of the day, you're going to throw away 10% of those heads of lettuce. Because what people are going to do, right? They're going to start picking at the heads of lettuce in the box, and what's going to happen to the lettuce in the bottom of the box?
It's gonna be the nastiest lettuce.
Yeah, it's going to get squashed, and it's the first stuff that gets torn, and there's going to be pieces of it on the floor. And if it's a little bit too warm in your store, what happens to lettuce? Yeah, it starts to wilt faster, and it starts to liquefy, and you get that black stuff, you know, that.
Don't like that.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work so well. All right, so how do we figure out what price to set for the lettuce? All right, so now the book spends a great deal of time talking about how to create a formula for perishable goods. I'm going to try and give it to you in a slightly different way. So just realize that what I'm presenting to you is not the same as the text, but I'd like to think that it's easier. Okay? This is my 3-step process, okay? Step 1, add up the money. All right? And what I like to tell folks is that when you add up the money, don't forget to add not only the profit that you want, but also add the cost that you spent to get the items, right? So when you set the price of a head of lettuce and you paid 20 cents for each head of lettuce, don't forget the 20 cents you paid for each head of lettuce, all right? Step 2 is to calculate the items that you're going to sell, okay? Basically, folks, what happens is that grocery stores keep a very close tab of how much of a product that they throw away. as a percentage of all of the items that they purchase. So if they purchase 100 heads of lettuce, and they know that at the end of the day, they're always going to throw away 10 of them, they'll look at that and say, hey, 10% of my heads of lettuce perish every time I buy lettuce. So they're going to keep track of that number, and anytime they buy lettuce, they're going to assume 10% of them, I'm not going to sell. Okay? Because you need to not only make up for the fact that you had to pay for those 10 heads of lettuce, but you have to make up for the fact that you're not selling them, so you're not getting the profit from each one of those heads of lettuce, right? So that's a problem, all right? And here is the really scary and difficult step 3. Price equals number 1 divided by number 2. All right, now, seeing how those things lead to numbers, obviously there's no way to do it without doing an example. So we got to do one, all right? So let's try one. Again, though, 3-step process, all right? So I am running a bake sale to donate money to BTC scholarships. Okay. Whatever reason you're running a bake sale, folks, let's assume that you're running one, okay? Because this is a classic example to use when it comes to doing perishables. Because let's face it, folks, when you do a bake sale, things perish. I mean, it could be because,
Hopefully not eat.
yeah, it's probably because you ate whatever it is that you're making, or, you know, you dropped it, right, it accidentally fell on the floor, right, and then you ate it. Yeah, exactly, whatever. The fact remains is that there are certain pieces of what you make that don't actually get sold. Okay, so, folks, what are we making for our bake sale?
Cake.
Cake?
Brownies.
Let's go with brownies, they're a little bit easier. Okay, so,
Cake is the first thing that came to mind.
cake was my birthday last week, I understand. Alright, so, how many brownies are we gonna make?
7.
47.
Let's make it a nice even number. Alright, so I make 100 brownies. 47? It's going to be hard to take 20% of 47. Alright, so I make 100 brownies. How much does it cost to make a brownie, folks, in general? What's your approximation?
Probably make like 25 for $4 to make them out of the box.
But we're not going to use a box. We're going to make this up from scratch.
Oh, jeez, princess.
Exactly. Alright, so let's suppose it costs 20 cents to make each brownie.
Oh, just split everything up, I guess.
Okay, now, how much profit do I want? Now, normally, folks, profit is going to be defined as a percentage of the amount of money that you spend, all right? This is another classic sort of example of the way business works in this country. In order to make lots of money, you have to spend lots of money first, right? The goal, of course, is to spend someone else's money, not your own. Venture capital, that kind of stuff, right? But if it comes down to it, it might have to be your own, all right? So, I want profit of, let's suppose I want 150% on cost. So normally your profit will be a percentage of how much you spend. That's how it's worded in order to do it, all right? Now, here's the big question. What percent of our brownies are going to perish? 10%? Okay. We expect a 10% loss in product due to accidents. It accidentally fell in my mouth. I accidentally gave one away to my, to my kids or to my parents or my brother or whoever happened to be around. and so we're gonna expect 10% of them to not get purchased, alright? So, the question now is, what price should I set the brownies at? Should I set the price for the brownies? Alright, folks, so step one, money. First off, how much money am I spending? What are my costs?
It's 20 cents for each brownie.
20 cents for each brownie, so how much am I spending? Cost equals 0.2 times 100, 20 bucks. Now, please don't forget that you have to make cost and profit. What is my profit, folks?
So you're not gonna sell 10.
We gotta do our profit first. What's our profit?
Grand.
150%
150% of what?
cost.
Cost. So what should I write? 1.5 of, that's times, and what's my cost?
20,
20 bucks. What's 1.5 times 20?
30.
So I want to make 30 bucks, basically, right? That's $30 of profit. Don't forget, though, that when I sell the brownies, I also have to make the $20 that I spent and give that back to myself as well, right? No. I'm spending 20 and I'm gonna make, what's 20 plus 30? 50. So the real key here is that the amount of money I wanna make from selling my brownies is the $50. So it's the 30 bucks that I'm looking to make, okay? This is not a get, all of you through BTC for nothing kind of scholarship, folks, right? This is, get you a cab ride home, a couple of times because your car breaks down, that kind of business, okay? So, that's step one. So now we have done step one. We found the cost and the profit. Please don't forget to add them. So we need to make 50 bucks from selling our brownies. How many brownies are we going to sell? We wish we sold 100 of them, but some of them are going to perish. Exactly. Since you're losing 10% of them, that means that you're going to sell 90% of them, right? Use that complement concept. 100 times 0.9 means we're going to sell 90 brownies. We now have how much money we need, how many brownies we're going to sell. Now we can figure out the price, because that's what step 3 is all about. Price is the 50 bucks I need, divided by the 90 brownies I'm going to sell. Point 5. So we need to set the price of our brownies to at least 56%. Now, since we're running a bake sale, folks, what are we probably going to set the price to? Yeah, at least 60 cents. We're definitely not going to work with pennies. We may even say, well, crap, this is for a good cause. Let's put it up to at least $1. We might say 75 cents, so we have to deal with quarters. And then we can start making change. We can talk to people about math because we need to know more math and they need to know more math. And so we can start saying, well, it's 75 cents for one, it's 2 for $1.50, but it's 4 for $2.50, and that's a deal. Why? And you can start asking them math questions, right? I mean, this is what you do at a bake sale, right? You make the people that you're meeting do math because it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I do at a bake sale. When I used to work the county fair in Indiana, I grew up in Valparaiso, Indiana, so I would always work the county fair, and I got to set the price of the sodas that I sold, and I used to set them to weird prices like 35 cents. They wouldn't let me set it to like 32, which is what I wanted to do, and then I could start talking to them about powers of 2, but they wouldn't let me. So it had to end in a nickel. So I always made it a weird combination. So somebody came up once and said, well, I need 5. And I'm like, cool, that'll be $1.75. She's like, $1.75? I'm like, yeah, 35 cents each. She's like, 35 cents each? Wait, she ruffled around in her purse, pulled out her calculator, did the 35 times 5. And she's like, oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And then we had a conversation of multiplying the numbers with her kids. We're right there. And I was like, guys, 35 cents. If there were 2 of them, how much would it cost? And they're like, 70 cents. They could do that in their head. It was really cool. We did the math. And you guys have never had that experience at the county fair before?
I never worked
Well, okay, you guys are on a mission now. This is your mission for some time in your life. Even you, Greg, you're young enough, you can still do this. Get to the county fair and sell something and make it a weird price so that you can talk about math with people.
I have allergies. I can't go without a year.
All right, but anyways, that's the idea behind perishable goods. Setting the price to make up for the fact that you're losing items and that you need the profit to make. All right? Not bad?
That's okay.
All right, so. Now, let's imagine, if you will, guys, that we do this brownie thing, right? So we make 100 brownies, and we go to the cafeteria here at Blackhawk, and we say, okay, we're going to sell these brownies. And let's suppose, for simplicity's sake, that we did set the price to $1, right? And since we made them, we already ate the 10 perished brownies. And so we're selling these 90 brownies. And we're selling them for $1. We're thinking, well, if we sell 90 of them, that would be a good thing, right? Because, yeah, I mean, it's more than the 50 that we need. That'll be a nice little donation to the scholarships. Great. So we set up our little stand, and people wander over, and they're like, $1 for that brownie? I'm like, yeah, sure. $1 for people buy 1 or 2. And all of a sudden, the people that bought 1 or 2, they come back like 2 or 3 minutes later, and they're like, can I have 5? You're like, well, sure, we got 5 over here. And so they give you a 5, and you hand them 5, and they're like, sweet. And they like eat the 5, and they come back, and they're like, can I get 10?
These
You're
are
like-
hot brownies. It's giving them eternal munchies.
We didn't put anything in there. They still cost 20 cents to make, folks, right? So this is not like we're putting any special ingredients in the brownies. But the fact remains that we sell all of our 90 brownies in like 20 minutes. People keep coming back like 30 minutes later going, oh, don't you have any more brownies? We're like, no, we sold them all out. What do we do next week, folks?
Big one.
Yeah.
Raise the price.
Or well, we keep it set at $1, but we double the number that we make, right? Because yeah, we got lucky once. Maybe it was just weird, right? Maybe whoever was making the brownies did have a special ingredient. We just didn't know about it, right? So we make 200 the next week. Same thing happens. We're still selling them for $1. It only cost us 20 cents to make them. We doubled the amount of profit that we made that we donated to the scholarship fund of BTC. Do this running for a couple of weeks, right? You keep doubling the number that you make. Now, first off, which one of you guys is making the brownies? I see everybody volunteering, right?
Of all the weed jokes I've been making, you may not want to make brownies.
Regardless, though, somebody has to be making these brownies, right? And eventually, we get to that point where it's too much, right? I mean, if you're making 600 or 800 brownies over a week, I mean, that's actual work, right? If you're doing 100, then it can be fun, and you're eating a couple of them, and it's just a good time. But now you make 600 or 800 of them, and but we're still selling all of them in less than an hour. What do we do?
Get another person.
We start a business. We're like, look, whatever the formula is that you're using to make brownies, because you made them by scratch, we need to duplicate this and do it on a large scale, right? So we say, okay, let's get, let's rent one of these big, huge facilities that has cooking facilities inside of it that we can use to just make brownies, right? There's probably 1 or 2 of them that are shut down right now that we could rent for a couple of months or something like that and try it, see if it keeps working, right? I mean, we don't know. We've been making all this money and we've been donating it. And we're like, but now it's time to start making the donations to ourselves, right? So if we're making $6,000 or $7,000 in a weekend, wouldn't it be nice if we could all have our hand in that little till and maybe have it every week, right? So we start a business. we start selling brownies, and it turns out that it's real, right, folks? For whatever reason, the brownies that we're making are actually really good, and they're different than all the other brownies that are out there, and they don't taste like crap, they don't taste fake, and so everybody keeps buying them, right? We start making arrangements with local grocery stores, and they say, hey, you know, you keep selling these brownies at BTC, why can't I sell some of them at Hy-Vee over here, or I sell them over at the Quickie Mart, or some of them want to sell them at the Piggly Wiggly, and they're like, well, yeah, sure, no problem. We start selling them to grocery stores who sell them. We're all of a sudden, you know, cranking out tens of hundreds of thousands of brownies a week, all right? And now we need to start dealing with this business. So how do you deal with the business, folks? Well, how does a business break up its costs, folks? How many of you have actually read a quarterly report from a business before? Have any of you actually looked at it? A couple over here? Greg, you've never looked at a quarterly report yet? You have a mission as well. All right, so anyways, costs are broken up into two categories. One of them are fixed costs. What are fixed costs, folks? Yeah. These are costs that do not change based on the amount you produce. So if we made 100,000 brownies, these costs would be a certain amount. If we made 10 brownies, these costs would be the exact same amount, okay? So, what sorts of things are there that are like this? Rent, right? Rent, and we can also or mortgage if we decide to buy, right? Every month you're going to have to pay your mortgage payment or your rent payment, whichever one it is. What else? I suppose we could put it in there. Again, that's one of the, if you're renting the equipment, I suppose we could call that rent, but you may call it maintenance. Maybe that's a better word, right? Equipment maintenance. How's that? Right? Because in theory, when you buy your brownie making equipment, you don't need to buy it again, right? You've bought it once, that's enough. But if you have to maintain it, yeah. All right, what else? You have to pay even if you don't do anything. Well, but if you're not making anything, do you need any employees? Nah. Although you may think of it in this term. If you hire certain people at a salary instead of hourly, right? If they're salaried employees, you have to pay them every month, even if all they do is sit around with their finger up their nose, right? Right? I mean, you can't stop paying their salaries until you fire them, right? So, all right. So what else? I mean, who always has their hand in your pocket, folks? Government. Taxes. Those are always up there, folks. That's right, and taxes is going to be up there no matter what. The other one that you have to have all the time, just in case, when you drive your car, what are the two things that, there you go, right? The other thing that you almost always have to have other than paying for taxes is paying for insurance. Even if you don't make any brownies. If you're renting a facility and someone walks on your facility and trips and breaks their leg, guess whose fault it is? Yours, and if you do not have the appropriate insurance for that, it comes out of your pocket to fix their leg, right? And this is why you have business insurance, folks. So this is a good list, okay? So, those are fixed costs. What are the other types of costs? If they're not fixed, they are flexible. That's a good way of putting it, but we will use a more economics-based term. How about variable? So if you haven't taken econ yet, these are the two terms you'll learn about costs when you get into econ, fixed costs and variable costs. Len will teach you that stuff. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I take the 8 a.m. class like I do. It's the only one they had in Monroe,
Oh,
so I
yeah.
took it.
You gotta
It
do what
wasn't
you
too
gotta
bad.
do. And folks, these are costs based on the amount produced. These costs will go up the more you make, go down the less you make. And if you don't make anything, in theory, these costs should be none. Alright? So, what sorts of stuff are variable costs? Hmm?
Supplies.
Supplies, yeah. So, ingredients / supplies, whatever you want to call them. What else? Well, if you have salaried employees, what's the other side of the coin? Hourly wages. Again, if you're not making anything, you won't hire any of those hourly people, so those wages will be zero. Who always has their hand in your pocket, folks? Taxes. The more people you hire, the more unemployment taxes you have to pay, the more, FICA insurance taxes you have to pay, the more, it goes on and on. The number of taxes that businesses pay are exorbitant as well. And they're all spread out all over the place too. It's not like there's just one tax rate, right? There's like 18 different tax rates and you have to pay all of them separate. Right? So let's see, what else do we need up here?
Utilities?
Utilities, good one. And again, utilities is one of those that sometimes hops back and forth because certain pieces of utility you have to pay no matter what. Even if you turn the lights off, right, you're still going to have an electric bill because you're connected to the system, right? And you're going to have night lights on your parking lot. So these sorts of things might be considered fixed costs. That utilities is one of those iffy things that hops back and forth, but it's a good one to keep track of. What else? What else do you have to have just in case? Insurance, yeah. Insurance is another one of those that can kind of hop back and forth between the fixed costs and variable costs because it's hard to say what's fixed and what's variable when it comes to insurance, right? But if you have your line at a specific factory running for 24 straight hours, folks, you need to have more insurance because you're more likely to have a workplace accident, right? If you only have your factory working for 8 hours and one line open, you need less insurance because it's less likely that you run into a problem. So you gotta adjust these based on the amount that you're producing. So anyways, that's a decent start. Anyway, so now the question is, why do we care about the two different cases? Why do we separate them? Why do businesses do that to us? What does it give us? What sorts of information?
It gives you what you're going to have to pay no matter what each one.
Uh-huh.
Your variable cost.
I got you. So variable costs, folks, are the cost of production, okay? Right? And what businesses are looking for is profitability, okay? And variable costs are what a business sees when they are low. That's what makes a business look profitable. It makes it look attractive to purchase and to buy and to potentially use to make money. Because if you come into a business and its variable costs are low and you have a way of reducing their fixed costs because you know bankers and you know the government, and so you have ways to reduce your tax burden, you have ways to reduce the amount of rent that you're going to have to pay, and you know how to fire salaried employees really quickly because you're a good business person and you say FTEs are bad, right? You just start calling them a 3-letter acronym and then start removing them from the picture because they're not really people, even though they are. But that's a very classic sort of business approach, is to say, well, I can get rid of those, but variable costs, it's hard to reduce those because those are the things you have to pay to make your stuff, right? And so what often businesses do in order to look attractive to other companies, if you are in a business and you're trying to get out of the business, you're trying to sell, what you do as a business owner is you try to put as many of your costs in the fixed cost line as possible. Because the lower your variable costs are, the more attractive to take over you are. And there are a whole lot of questionable business practices as to where these particular items should be, whether they should be down here, or maybe you could just rotate them up there for a couple of years so that your utilities look like they're more of a fixed cost, and now people can buy your businesses and you can sell and get out, right? Again, it's maybe not ethical, but it's definitely legal, right? This is the whole, there's lots of examples of this throughout history, but that's the idea, right? And so this is the sort of thing that you play around with. Now, that aside, right? If you have costs, what's the other side of the coin? Revenue. Can't quite get to profit yet. Revenue is what you sell your item at, okay? Number of items times the price of your item. Now, for us, we're just selling brownies, folks, right? So the sale price of our brownies it's relatively straightforward, because we're only making one thing. Most companies do not make just one thing, so there have to be multiple prices floating around here. But the fact remains is that, for the most part, we're not selling anything other than the products that we're making, okay? We're not a diversified business, we're a straightforward business, right? So number of items times the price. Now, one of the things that we talk about in the business world is something called the contribution margin. This is a term I would like you guys to know. It's abbreviated with the letter CM. And the contribution margin in terms of business, profit from sale of each item. That's its definition. How much profit do you earn from a sale? Not revenue, folks, profit, okay? And so what the contribution margin is generally the selling price of your item minus the average variable cost. And the average variable cost, think of that as the cost to produce your item. So for us, our average variable cost is the 20 cents it costs us to make a brownie, okay? And if we're selling our brownies for $1, what's our contribution margin? What's $1 minus 20 cents? 80 cents. So basically, our business, for every brownie that we sell, was making 80 cents in profit. We were covering our variable costs, because that's the 20 cents we spent to make it. And that extra 80 cents was straight take-home profit, all right? Now, that covers our variable cost. This covers our variable costs. What's missing? Fixed, right? We still need to cover our fixed costs. The break even, or called the BE point, is the amount of items we need to sell to cover our fixed costs. So another term that is often used in the business world, that's a big deal, is this break-even point. And it's the spot where if you sell this number of items, you have covered all your variable costs, you've covered all of your fixed costs. This means you have covered all of your costs, and everything you sell after that is true take-home profit for the business, okay? So the contribution margin shows you how much you make every time you sell an item, covering your variable costs. The break-even point tells you how many of those items you need to cover all of your fixed costs, and from that point on, you're just walking to the bank with every item that you sell, all right? And the formula, folks, to figure out what the break-even point is take your fixed costs and divide by your contribution margin. Alright? Not bad? So those are kind of the ways that you have to deal with creating business level reports that talk about what's going on in your business, right? You have to talk about fixed costs, you have to talk about variable costs, you have to talk about the revenue you're working with, and you will generally give some sort of a contribution margin analysis and a break-even point analysis. Alright? So, let's do an example, and then how we're doing. And then we can call it a day. Alright? So, let's suppose that our brownie company has fixed costs of, let's say, $120,000. And note, folks, in that fixed cost is my annual salary of $60,000. Since I was the one who came up with this business idea, you have to pay me $60 grand a year to make money off of it, okay? I hope you don't mind, but that's the price of business, okay? Our brownies cost about 35 cents to make, on average. Again, we have lots of different factories making the brownies. Some of them are a little bit more expensive, some of them are a little bit less, kind of depends on where the factories are. But after we go through all of the processing, we figure out that it costs us about 35 cents per brownie to make. Let's suppose that on average we sell our brownies for $1.85. We sell them for $2 a brownie, but we also package the brownies together, and when we sell more than, say, a dozen brownies, we cut the price down to like $1.75 per brownie, and if they buy a big huge crate, then we'll sell them for $1.50 a brownie. We give them bulk deals and stuff like that. So on average, we sell our brownies for $1.85. All right? And my question to you is, what's the break-even point? And folks, the break-even point is the number of brownies you have to sell to make a profit, to not be losing money anymore, okay? All right, so how are we going to figure this out? So first off, what do we have to do to find the break-even point? I would assume you guys would write down the formula. Fixed over contribution margin, right? And you just have to tell me what's the contribution margin, what's the fixed costs, and you can do it, right? What are the fixed costs?
120,000.
Yeah, 120,000.
Slightly.
What's the contribution margin, folks? How much money do I make from each brownie that I sell? That's how much I sell it for, is $1.85, right? That's my revenue. What's my profit? Remember, it costs me 35 cents to make the brownie. I sell it for $1.85.
150.
150. So selling price minus the average variable cost. So note, the cost to produce the item, that's what we mean by average variable cost, okay? So it's $1.50. So take that 120,000, divide by 1.5. How many brownies do we need to sell, folks? 80,000 brownies. Please note, folks, that the break-even point is not money. You know what the money amount is. That's $120,000. You're trying to figure out the number of items you need to sell. That's where you divide the numbers. Okay, so this is 80,000 brownies. Please note another piece about this. No matter what happens when you divide by your contribution margin, folks, if you wind up with a decimal, please always round the number up because you have to guarantee that you are making a profit. If you round the number down, even though you should potentially, please note that that means you're still losing money and that's not the break-even point yet, okay? So if this number had been like 1.51, and we had something like 75,222.2 brownies, you would round it up to 75,223 because you always have to be past whatever the break-even point is. All right? If it's exactly a number, then you can just sort of say, there, we're good, no problem. All right? All right, so that is the end of chapter 8. So what does that mean I am doing? Homework, yes. What are the homework numbers?
I don't know.
2 through
40.
2 through 40, even. Please note, skip.
40, yes.
Is it 40 or 44?
There's 42 with the special question at the end,
Oh yeah, that's extra credit.
so it's like 40.
Please note that number 16 and number 36 talk about calculating what the markup by cost and markup by price percentages are that are the same. I do not care about those particular problems, so please skip them. I give you those points for free for both of those questions, so, but you don't have to actually do them, all right? All right, so the plan, folks. Thursday, review, chapter 6, 7, 8. Tuesday next week, next test.
He also can't see, so
I know, I'm great.
we're good for a
What's the date today?
9.
So please note, Tuesday next week will be our next test. Please be ready.
What? Don't feel good? What, the tape?
Don't forget to remember.
I know the date. I know the date very well.
Don't forget to turn it off.